What's up everyone, my name is Boxjonge and I hope you guys are having a wonderful day today. This week, Jagex Game Jam is in full swing, which is an exciting time of the year. And to celebrate the 5th iteration of the Game Jam, I want to share my Slayer rebalance proposal with you. I've been working on this for a pretty long time, and this seems the perfect time to finally share it. In this proposal, I will fully dissect the Slayer skill and transform it into the best possible version of itself. If you like the idea and want to see more ideas like this, please consider subscribing and share this video with your friends. And I will be taking a crack at other major skill reworks or rebalances later this year. So let me know down in the comments which skill you want to see rebalanced. So without further ado, let's dive in. Here's the document that I made for the proposal. You can find it in the description of the video to read along, or if you want to find out all the details about the updated Slayer skill. And the video will have timestamps for all the major talking points, and here is what you can expect in the video. I will talk about a new system, including Partner Slayer finally again, some new rewards and items, addressing unpopular Slayer creatures, and at the end we have some discussion points. First we have an introduction. Slayer is a very popular skill, and for good reason. It offers great variety, exciting drops, superior encounters of regular Slayer monsters, and even the ability to fight certain bosses on a Slayer task. But Slayer also has a fair amount of flaws. First, I want to give some history on the skill in old school RuneScape. Basically, the only thing we had back in the day in 2013 was Turael Skipping. That was the way to train Slayer. If you got a shit task from Turael, you went to Turael to cancel it and hope you would get a good task like Dagonaut or Calfights. And this was not a great skill interaction for most players and still isn't. So the old Slayer meta was rather outdated for the new and returning player base of old school RuneScape, which led to one of the biggest updates in the first year of old school RuneScape, the Slayer reward point system. And this update was huge quality of life for its time, but now the update has been like 10 years old at this point, and Slayer is completely locked by this point system. And that brings along a couple crucial flaws in my opinion. So, some of the flaws that I have with the skill are that like most of the interactions or unlocks of the skill are locked behind this point system and not actual like progressing of the Slayer skill, making it almost more of a minigame than a skill. The point system is heavily skewed towards high Slayer levels and the late game itself because of the quest point block slots, for example, making the early and mid game for Slayer very sluggish and often disliked. Which also leads in point number 3 that point boosting is incentivized and a main pillar of early Slayer, so you can get your unlocks and blocks up and running instead of actually progressing the skill like normal. Turael skipping, number 4, is why this system is like introduced, is still very much a thing. And it is still very much disliked by players who are after a specific boss task, but fear not, I will have a solution for this later down the line in this proposal. And also number 6 is a fairly important one, I think, that pretty much all the early game Slayer masters are next to useless because they just don't give enough points and are just skipped by the majority of players. And I think we can do a lot better with that to actually have all the Slayer masters some progression in the Slayer skill. But don't get me wrong, the Slayer skill as is isn't like broken or unplayable. It's still a great skill, matter of fact one of my favorite skills, but I think with some simple changes it can become the perfect skill. So I propose that the current Slayer reward points system is removed from the game and a new system gets introduced. And that new system is called the customizable task list system. And the goals that I have for this new system is that it needs to make Slayer feel like a real skill with meaningful level progression outside of just new Slayer monsters. It needs to fix low-level Slayer and make every Slayer master viable. It will not buff endgame XP because I'm very cautious about that myself. So I will not try to do that. There might be some slight buffs, but that is mostly quality of life. Still keep the variety and surprise element of getting a new task. Improve the bad Slayer tasks, and add extras on top if there's room. So what is this new Slayer system all about? The basic idea is that you, as a player, Instead of blocking and skipping tasks, you can now pick your Slayer task pool from a Slayer Master. And the amount you need to pick will depend on which Slayer Master you are slaying at. And then, once you have picked your pool, the Slayer Masters can only assign tasks from that pool. Players would have a unique task list per Slayer Master, and changing out tasks can be done at any time and is completely free of cost. Players need to have their current list filled to be able to receive tasks, so you won't be able to just select Spoke Devils and only spam those. It would of course be possible to exceed the number required per task master if you wanted to take on more than the minimum required task. And the task weightings would remain unchanged, because that is actually what balances all the XP rates in the skill. So with the help of some others, I made a new interface that players would be using to set up their custom lists. By selecting a monster on the left, you will be presented with all the necessary info here on the right. So players can find where the monsters are located, what the task weighting is, requirements, Slayer items and more. In the bottom right there are 4 buttons. Clicking Add Task will add it to your custom list and counts to the number in the top left that you need to fill out to then receive Slayer tasks. Extending tasks will of course extend your task and can be toggled on for free. No more points for extending a task and feeling bad to unextend it because you have to buy it back later. Then we have the option Pick as Urgent Task, which is a new feature which is an alternative to Turael Slayer, which I will be talking a lot more about in detail in a couple minutes. And lastly, I think Show Locations would be sick if the world map popped open if you clicked it and highlighting the dungeon or the general area so the player does not need to wiki their way to the new monster. But this custom task list system alone will not make Slayer the perfect skill. There need to be other changes made, which we are gonna talk about now. First up, we have some Slayer Master changes. With the custom task list, each Slayer Master will require you to make your own custom list before you are able to receive tasks from them. The number of tasks you need to select differs from master to master to reflect the player's Slayer level and to keep XP rates balanced for each master. At level 1, the player has only access to Turael and needs to select 5 Slayer tasks to be able to get assigned tasks. And this number would increase with each new unlocked Slayer Master when the player levels up in the skill, as the variety of Slayer monsters also increases with a higher Slayer level. However, many of the higher Slayer Masters will require you to complete one of their trials before you are allowed to use their custom lists. And the Slayer Masters will therefore have a meaning in the progression of Slayer. They will get new requirements, which means the combat level requirement would no longer exist to be able to receive an assignment. And the level progression for Slayer Masters and the task pools would look like the following. We have Turael at 5, which goes all the way up to then Duradel at level 75 Slayer with a task pool of 12 and in between its skills. And we actually have a new phase on the list, which I will be talking a lot more about in the next couple minutes. And also something, when you unlock a new Slayer monster by reaching the required Slayer level, the next time you are going to your Slayer Master, they will tell you that you are now able to slay that new monster, and will ask you if you want to add it to your custom list. If you choose to do so, it will be added on top of your current list, so your list will be 9 out of 8 if it was at 8 out of 8. And on top of that, you have a 100% chance to receive that task right away. So no more hoping to get a new Slayer monster that you just unlocked like 4 Slayer levels later. And if you select no, you will just receive a random task from that list like normal. So now you can adjust your Slayer list to your needs without relying too much on RNG. You could even create separate Slayer lists for AFK tasks only, efficient barraging, bossing, and maybe some lower level Slayer Masters could actually be useful for hunting champion scrolls and other collection log items on task. Furthermore, Slayer task extensions will now add plus 50 monsters from the current minimum and maximum assigned per Slayer Master. Currently it goes to 200 to 250 right away, even at the masters like Vanica and Cheldar. So the new extended amounts for most common tasks at the masters would be looking like the following. Duradel would still remain at a maximum amount, but the other Slayer Masters would be toned down a little bit. to actually reflect their place in the progression of the Slayer skill. Alright, now we have Partner Slayer, guys. 4 years after Partner Slayer has been disabled, it will be revived along the introduction of the customizable Slayer list. And the new Slayer Master that I spoke about briefly earlier is Sigli the Huntsman. He will be a new Slayer Master requiring level 25 Slayer and the completion of the Fremennik Trials quest. And you would require to select 7 Slayer tasks from his pool to start getting assignments. Sigli will now allow players to group up to take on his Slayer tasks. A player can form a group by using the Slayer gem on the other players to invite them. So now we have some info and rules, because yeah, Partner Slayer was getting kinda abused, and the only way I think to make it work is by adding a new Slayer Master instead of allowing all the Slayer Masters to have the partner option, because that just results in abuse like every angle you take. So for the rules, similar to what it was before, like none of the teammates can have an assignment to be able to partner up. Makes sense. The group leader will be the one that controls like the task list and all that stuff. Slayer points cannot be exchanged when in a group, because that would also lead to abuse by switching group masters. Group sizes can range from 2 to 5 players, so you can also take on assignments with your group Ironman group if you have still 5 people playing. And the amount of assigned monsters will scale with the amount of players in the group. However, it will also be possible to take on tasks alone. And the Slayer XP per monster will be evenly distributed across all team members. When all team members contributed to the task somewhat evenly, all the members will receive a small bonus XP drop at the end. And to prevent any form of boosting, all players need to be in combat, dealing damage and within X amount of tiles of the slain monster to receive the XP. And boosting most limit accounts isn't possible already due to the Fremennik Trials quest being required, and that rewards attack, strength and defense and hit points XP, so level 3s or 1 dev accounts cannot be making use of this, but there's more. Hold on. So yeah, Sigli will be a master focusing on players between level 25 and 75 Slayer, and his list will be slightly different compared to regular Slayer masters. Instead of only assigning specific monsters, he will instead assign some cluster tasks, to give the group a bigger diversity of monsters without bloating the task list too much. Like we have giants, so that's all the giants, spectral creatures, which is a bunch of monsters, including the Barrows brothers and maybe even Muspa. I'm not too sure how that works, but it is classified as a spectral creature, I think. We have demons, which will only count lesser, greater and black demons. This will be pretty cool for Zamorak God Wars. Then we have chromatic dragons, which will be the green to black dragons and the brutals. And metallic dragons, which will be all the metal dragons. And of course you would also be able to assign some of the regular monsters, and most of these will be home to the Fremennik area, so you could also almost see this as a Fremennik specific Slayer Master. But then we also have Crystallia will also be given the option to take on tasks with your friends. And the same rules would apply to Crystallia, but of course all her tasks need to be completed in the wilderness. Alright, so now on to Turael Skipping. With the removal of the Slayer points and introducing customizable task lists, Turael Skipping would become a lot better for getting a specific task. Turael Skipping would still remain as a failsafe, but it could create an unattended meta for efficient Slayer training if there's no drawback to just cancel your Turael task at Turael when you have a task that is worse XP rates than most of your other tasks. So skipping a task from a higher Slayer Master at Turael will not reset your task streak, but you will get reduced Slayer XP on your next task after the skip, which would directly address the skipping for efficiency, but allow players that find themselves stuck on a task to downgrade to Turael to then continue their Slayer adventure. But what about Turael skipping for a specific task or a boss task? Well, Turael skipping would still be the meta for boss tasks with a customizable system, because you would have a smaller pool to actually get assigned monsters from at your higher tier master. But having to interact with a very low level combat to get your task that you want just doesn't feel great and still relies too much on RNG to actually get the task. And I think we can easily do better than this silly method. To finally put an end to hours of killing goblins, bats and jackals for a boss task, I propose the following idea: urgent Slayer tasks. This idea was originally made by Adicon, so thank you for that. I reworked it slightly to make it and have it fit better in my overall idea where I want to go with Slayer. So the step-by-step breakdown of the idea is that you go to any Slayer Master and you click the button Pick as Urgent Task on the new interface. And then the Slayer Master gives you a set of challenges, which consist of 2 to 4 mini-tasks that you need to do first before receiving your task of choice. After completing all the mini-tasks, the player returns to the Slayer Master and will then be assigned the requested Slayer task. It seems pretty straightforward, but I still want to share some important info about this. So you are receiving slightly easier tasks than the chosen one. So let's say if you picked Cave Horrors, you will be asked to kill some mutated bloodvelds, black demons and some killer wats. But if you picked a Slayer task like Zuk, you might be asked to kill 2 Zulra, 4 demonic gorillas, 7 steel dragons and 35 fire giants. These mini-tasks would not be skippable, but you would be able to go back to a normal Slayer, of course. And the goal is to guarantee a task in like 15 to 20 minutes for the average player. This feature would be disabled in Partner Slayer to again prevent some boosting shenanigans if there's any. Konar Slayer would still assign a random location. Cristelia would of course assign wilderness only monsters for the mini tasks as well. And the amount of monsters on the task of choice is capped to like around 100 on certain tasks to not affect metas for XP. This is mostly about Necrials for Iron Man in the Slayer Tower, because that could create some unattended herblore metas if you could only just spam Necrials for the majority of your Slayer. Now I want to talk a little bit about Slayer credits and task streaks. Because I think with Turael Skipping and urgent Slayer task, it is still not enough to give the player a smooth Slayer experience. And to keep things a little bit familiar, there will be still some sort of Slayer points, but it will only be Slayer task related. All the other unlocks that previously were locked behind a paywall will no longer require points and will instead be integrated with the progression of the Slayer skill. So I propose a new task streak system, where you just get a Slayer credit for every task you complete. Every 10th you gain 3 bonus credits and every 50 you gain 8 bonus credits. So it would result in 70 credits per 50 tasks completed. And there would also be a cap of 100 credits. And this cap could increase with quest points, similar to how it currently works with block slots. So 300 quest points equals a point cap of 300 points. And I think it is important to have a point cap in place here to prevent stacking up too many points and essentially storing XP for records/competition's sake. Because the things you can do with the Slayer points are as follows. You can still skip tasks, because sometimes you are just like not in a mood to do a task, so you can just simply spend 10 credits to move on to the next task. Storing tasks will be free, and more on how to unlock storing a task later. And then we have a new thing, which is choose a specific Slayer task, which will cost 30 credits, and the credits are actually relatively like slow to obtain, so you can't be like spending 30 credits like every task, of course. So this would just be a quick alternative instead of the urgent Slayer task if you just want to like straight away get a task. Maybe you have saved up some points when you are getting close to 85 Slayers, so you can get your whip right away by just dumping points on Abbey Demon tasks. And the current Slayer points would cease to exist, but any points that players have will be converted to credits and divided by 10. So if you have 1000 Slayer points, that would now be 100 credits. Alright, so now let's talk about Slayer unlocks. Well, I said this like 5 times by now, but all the Slayer unlocks are currently locked behind the reward shop, which just gives me a minigame type of feel, and that is not good. So to actually tie these into the progression of Slayer itself, I came up with this following suggestions. So most of the things will just be locked behind Slayer level, like the ability to create a Slayer helmet will be level 60 Slayer and 55 crafting. Recoloring Slayer helms will be 80 Slayer and the respective item. And here we also have the task storage that you will be just unlocking at level 70 Slayer. And then for some other task unlocks, we just have some other requirements now instead of having to buy these with points. So now I want to talk about new rewards and items, because with an update like this to Slayer, we can't leave out some potential new rewards to give some extra oomph to leveling up your Slayer skill and to revive some less popular Slayer creatures, because that I think is also pretty important. So first up, this might be a little controversial, but I think it makes thematically a lot more sense and isn't like that bad when you actually think about the idea. But I would like to see the imbued version of the Black Mask or Slayer Helm be integrated into the Slayer skill itself than rather to imbue the mask at some unrelated minigame. Therefore, I want to add 2 new masks, one for boosting range attacks and one for boosting magic. So we have the Hex Cloth, which will be for magic, and it would drop from Infernal Mages, which would require level 45 Slayer and drop at a 1 in 256 chance. And you can combine this with a face mask to then create the Hex Mask, providing a 50% magic boost on Slayer task. And this Hex Mask would still function as a face mask, so you can still use this on Dust Devil task if you don't have the Slayer helm yet. Then we have the Focus Gem, which will drop from Turots at level 55 Slayer, so both of these are lower than the current Black Mask, so you can get your hands on these earlier. And also a 1 in 256 chance. Combining it with the Reinforced Goggles would create the Focus Goggles, providing a 50% range boost on Slayer tasks. But then we have something interesting here. Both the Hex Mask and Focus Goggles have a defense requirement of level 1 to equip it. And the Black Mask from Cave Horrors would remain boosting melee attacks, of course, but will also be lowered to 1 defense instead of 10. And then at level 60 Slayer and 55 crafting, as I mentioned before, you will be able to combine the 3 masks and all the other Slayer items into the Slayer helmet, which will then provide the player with all the boosts. But the helm will still require 10 defense. So what would happen to the current Slayer helm imbued? It would convert to like the new Slayer helmet, and any unimbued version would convert to a Black Mask with the update. And this new Slayer helmet will be untradeable and cannot be disassembled. This way the Hex and Focus masks won't be flooding the market after the update, and the new Slayer helm would function as an item sink for the 3 masks, and it would convert to coins if you would lose it on a PvP death. So yes, the Iron Man would have to get 2 extra items, but they will not have to imbue the mask anymore at Nightmare Zone. And it makes the whole process just a little bit more integrated with Slayer and more thematic and less Band-Aid minigame imbue fix. So this one is also maybe a little controversial for some, but I think this also just makes like very good sense. Currently, the Elite CA rewards give the player a 1 in 150 chance to get superiors down from 1 in 200. And I think this is just kind of weird to have it on the combat achieve. It's like why can't this just be tied to Slayer level? Because that just makes a little bit more sense to me at least. So it would just scale with your Slayer level. So at level 1 it is actually a 1 in 100. And then at level 50 it is just a 1 in 200, like the basic rate. And then just every 10 levels it increases the chance to receive superiors. And at level 99 you will be having basically the same reward as the Elite CAs at a 1 in 150 superior rate. And the same can be said for the Cannonballs. Like the multi-dwarf cannon is pretty much a Slayer only item, and very rarely, if even at all, does it see use during boss encounters. However, I still think it fits better with a new Dwarf Cannon quest or something like that, where you actually make or get a better cannon. But if it were to be tied to Slayer instead, this is what I would have in mind, that it just like scales with your Slayer level as well. At level 1 you only have 30, and at 92 you will be having 60 Cannonballs in your cannon. And on top of the superior scaling, I would like to see all unique Slayer monsters that currently do not have a superior get one. This largely applies to the early game only, and the reason for the 1 in 100 superior rated level 1 is that the superiors before level 50 all give small enough XP drops that it would not drastically increase XP rates, and you will kill so few of the early game Slayer monsters anyway, since they aren't assigned anymore by the higher level Slayer masters, that the chance is pretty big that you won't even encounter some of the superiors, which would be kinda a shame to like make new superiors, but then that you just then barely get them. So then we have a list of a bunch of new superiors, from all the ones that currently do not have one, and also, which was kind of surprising that the Cave Kraken never got a superior, and the Skeletal Wyvern as well, but we have those included in here, and a bunch of like low level ones that you can check out if you want. Alright, now we are getting close towards the end now, don't worry. But this is probably one of the most important parts about the whole Slayer overhaul, is that like some Slayer creatures right now are just ass. Like they are not good, everybody skips them or blocks them, and that is just, well, I think a shame, because some monsters look kind of cool, but they are just forgotten about, and yeah, I want to do something about that. So, if this customizable task list system were to be introduced, then it technically makes all the monsters that you did not put on your list an unpopular monster, right? So to still have players engage with the more unpopular monsters and not be locked to your 10 or 12 tasks that you have selected, the Slayer Masters came up with a little trick, which is called limited tasks. When asking your Slayer Master for a new task, there will be a, well, I have 1 in 8 here, but that number could be anything, but there will be a chance that the Slayer Master has a limited task for you to take on, and the monster assigned on this task will always be one that is not on your custom list. And this task is optional, and the player will be given a dialogue interface, and you can just refuse the task if you don't want to do it, receive a task from your list like normal, and the whole like limited task thing will be toggleable for people who are just after the best tasks. So this is what a chat box could look like, that you have to confirm that you want to slay your limited task or just go back to the regular Slayer. And this limited task would have a couple benefits. And the first one being double superior chance, because there's always people saying that the imbued heart is too rare, so this could be your chance to fight some more superiors if the task is a monster that actually has a superior variant. And second, you will be receiving 10% bonus XP for slaying monsters on a limited task. You will have increased loot, maybe a double loot roll, or maybe there is a new limited task drop table that you have a chance of rolling on. And at the end of the task, you will be receiving a small chunk of Slayer XP, which will scale with the combat level of the assigned monster. So for the basic tasks, you will get like 1k, but for the really difficult ones, you will get 5k Slayer XP, for example. And I think this will give some unpopular Slayer monsters suddenly a lot more appeal for a lot of players, because they just both have better drops, higher superior chance, and higher Slayer XP rates. And I think doing it in this way is actually a pretty organic way of doing it, instead of just like buffing certain like drop tables right away, because now you still keep that surprise element of receiving a limited task. Alright, then we have dragons, and I think that dragons might be like the most disliked task overall. I feel like most players just block iron and steel dragons because they just don't want to do them, but they actually have no idea what the weightings are. But currently we have 10 different Slayer tasks for dragons in the game. 10! We have green, blue, red, black, bronze, iron, steel, mithril, adamant and rune dragons. It's all separate Slayer tasks. And some of these are relatively rare compared to others, like black dragons have a weighting of 9 at Turael, meanwhile rune dragons and eddy dragons have a weighting of 2. And they are taking up a lot of space on some Slayer Masters task list, making it harder to add new monsters without bloating the task lists. So Turael, for example, assigns 8 out of the 10 dragons. It was briefly shown in Sigley's task list, but he assigns a lot of cluster tasks already. I don't want to do this for all the Slayer Masters to like only assign cluster task anymore, but I think for dragons in particular, they could really benefit from this change. So just how spiritual warriors and rangers and mages were grouped into spiritual creatures, I want to do the same for the dragons, to convert those 10 tasks into 2 new Slayer tasks, being Chromatic Dragons, which would consist of the green through black dragons plus all the brutals, and would start at a 10 to 25 task assigned, and extend would go up to 70 to 110, and would have a weighting of 9. And then, of course, the rest of the dragons would be grouped into metallic dragons, and the task size would be 10 to 15 unextended and 50 to 60 extended, with a weighting of 7. So this would give the player a lot more flexibility to choose which dragons to kill, and the extensions would of course be free to toggle on or off at any time. And then I want to also give a quality of life change to metal dragons, specifically loot-wise. All metal dragons will now drop a new item as a guaranteed drop called a metallic hide. Instead of the 1 to 5 metal bars, every kill drops the respective metal hide. This hide can be processed at a furnace to get the respective bars. And processing the hides would give some smithing XP and some amount of bars depending on the tier and smithing level. So all the details can be seen here down below. For some dragons it would increase the bars per kill, but the main thing here is that you can just actually take most of the bars with you when you're doing a Slayer task, because right now everybody just leaves the bars on the ground. But some of the hides will still drop noted, mainly the bronze, iron and steel hides in the Brimhaven dungeon with the Karamia diary, and for the mithril dragons you will need to complete the Kender and Heart diary for that to receive noted mithril hides. And last but not least, we have some new and unique monster drops. A lot of Slayer creatures are currently missing a unique item. The Project Rebalance by Jagex added a few to some early Slayer monsters, but then they were mostly removed later. But I want to add new items where there is room and it fits thematically. So with the help of some individuals from the RuneScape Artisan Guild Discord community, we came up with the following items and ideas. I'm not going to go through every item here, you can look in the document and read for yourself, but there's a couple interesting things or thematics happening here. Mostly we wanted to focus on like the old Slayer items, like in this case for the Harpy Bug Swarms. You will get a new item that you can combine with the Harpy Bug Lantern that then like does something. Same for the kilowatts, you will be able to upgrade your insulated boots to then have some extra effects on other content like Rune Dragons or maybe even Hydra. And then we have also like some new items coming, like the Slayer helms that we talked about earlier, and some other like mid to low level items that you can get from Slayer now, like the Spiritual Bracelet, which would basically be an Infinity Gloves alternative, because it has 1% magic damage bonus with the new rebalance. But when you are fighting spectral creatures, it suddenly goes up to 4% magic damage, and this would come from Spiritual Ranger, so it's like a nice mid-level item to obtain during your Slayer grind. Same for Spiritual Warriors, will be dropping a necklace that would be a ranging necklace, which has a slightly higher bonus than a Fury or Glory. It has 1 range strength normally, but it will have 3 range strength on spectral creatures. And also, this one is probably my favorite here, the Mordmeyer Fungi Spores from the Zygomites. It's not really a unique item or anything, but it would really help these monsters be favorable to fight. Because you can just get these mushroom spores and plant them into mushroom patches and then farm Mordmeyer Fungus. And of course some other improvements could be made to these, because they are pretty clunky and a little bit too old school for my liking sometimes. Same with Water Fiends, just like fix these monsters to not be just complete ass, please. And then finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about this one, the Thermonuclear Smoke Devil boss. Like currently it drops the Smoke Battle Staff, which has a 10% damage and accuracy boost for the regular spellbook. But to me it feels kind of weird that with like the elemental changes coming in pretty soon, that this damage bonus will also work for like spells where you wouldn't even use this staff with. So let's say if you are casting Water Wave, you would still need to have a Smoke Staff with you to get a 10% damage boost. So what I want to see is that Thermi gets a new drop instead of the Smoke Battle Staff, and the Smoke Battle Staff will just be a regular staff at this point. And the new item will be an isotopic orb, which you can then combine with any combination staff for this 10% damage and accuracy boost when casting its respective elemental spell. So for example, Smoke Staff would be only 10% damage on air and fire spells, and a Mud Staff, for example, would be water and earth, and all the other ones do the same. And you would need to combine the staff and the orb at a runecrafting elemental altar, and that would require a certain runecrafting level. And the effect can be transferred to other combo staves with the Crystal of Power. Yes, this is actually an existing item already in the POH, which you could use to like swap the elements on elemental staves currently. So that would be a nice revival of some ancient dead content. Because if you have to get like an orb for every staff, that would not really feel that great for Iron Man out there. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about all these item suggestions. And then we have some conclusion and discussion finally. It was a very, very long video, but I really hope you guys enjoyed watching this or reading the proposal, because I've spent a long time on this. And I really hope this at some point can be considered by the team to like make Slayer an even better skill. Like, it doesn't have to happen like right away, but somewhere like a year down the line, I think this could be a really healthy change to like have Slayer be updated to like the 2024 standards and be like ready for the next 10 years of old school, because the current system is just, I don't think the current system just works anymore for where old school is now. But yeah, please share the video or this document with your friends, and like, comment and upvote for more visibility, please. So now onto some discussion points. Like, I didn't really want to put these in the actual like proposal because I personally don't really care, but I just think that I want to like, yeah, discuss a little bit. So, quest requirements for tasks out of the window. Back in the day, most Slayer monsters that had quest requirements to them to be assigned were only found in those specific locations. But with the addition of new Slayer locations, like the Stronghold Slayer Cave and the Catacombs of Corinth, there are now multiple locations to fight those monsters. So, my question is, should that restriction be lifted where possible? And I'm mainly thinking about Priest in Peril for monsters like Bloodvelds, Aberrant Spectres, Necrials, that are now in the Catacombs or elsewhere. Or Treasure 1 for Dust Devils that are now also in the Catacombs. And Konar, of course, would not be able to assign those locations if the quest is not completed. But it makes sense, right? Like, there's multiple locations now, it's not really region locked anymore. And then we have on-task requirements. Currently there are certain Slayer monsters and bosses that are only available when on a Slayer task. And for 2 monsters, Cave Kraken and Smoke Devils, you need to be on task to fight them. And they were both added in 2014, and back then it made sense to not have them available off task right away, to not have the new items like coming in the game too quickly. And other Slayer monsters that were added at a later point did not have those restrictions, like the Worms, Drakes and Hydras and Warped Creatures. So to keep things consistent, I think the task restriction for a regular Cave Kraken and Smoke Devils could be lifted, and the boss variants would still require a task, of course, to also stay consistent with other bosses like Cerberus and Alchemical Hydra. But yeah, this one is also like a weird one, that it's kind of not in line with the newer generation of Slayer monsters. And then lastly, I had some discussion about 10 HP or level 3 Slayer. Like, I do want to include as many people when I like try to rework a skill to not like lock people out. But I'm not really sure what kind of impact this would have on level 3 or 10 HP Slayer. I think there's a lot of new ways to train Slayer with limited accounts when you remove the combat requirements from Slayer Masters. But then again, I'm also not sure if it actually nerfs any metas. So yeah, if there's any level 3s out there or 10 HP accounts, then yeah, please let me know what you think of this and if you could see any problems, because I'm just not really that qualified to talk about all the metas for limited accounts. But yeah, that was my whole proposal. It was a very very long video and a long talk, but yeah, again, I hope you guys enjoyed it. And yeah, let me know what other skills you want to see, and I'll be back at some point discussing other skills, and have a great rest of your day. and take care.